Everyone hear me? Good morning. Thank you for coming. Thank you for waiting and access to this. Great turnout today. Great turnout. So many of you know, my name is Andrew Beckwith. I'm president of Massachusetts Family Institute. And for many of you, like for the past decade, I've had the honor of being an active part of a vibrant pro-life movement here in the Commonwealth. And because of that, I am extraordinarily grateful for the tremendous work and accomplishments over the past 60 plus years of the many individuals and organizations represented here this morning in defending the lives of the unborn, particularly the Massachusetts Citizens for Life, the Pro-Life Legal Defense Fund, Renew Massachusetts Coalition, the Mass Catholic Conference, and the many leaders of our faith communities who rightly see this work as caring for the weakest and most vulnerable of our neighbors. Now, despite our efforts, there are still nearly 20,000 abortions a year in Massachusetts. And yet, some legislators in this building want to make that tragic number even higher. They're pushing legislation that would enable underage girls to get late-term abortions without their parents ever even being told. Now, as we've seen from abortion activists in New York and Virginia, these extremists want to change our laws so that viable, full-term babies who survive an abortion can be left to die, not on an operating table, because these abortions would no longer have to be performed in a hospital, but in an office stripped of emergency natal care equipment. Now that's the bad news, but we're here this morning for good news. And that good news is that despite what we are often told, this extreme pro-abortion agenda does not reflect the will of the people in our Commonwealth. In fact, a clear majority of Massachusetts voters reject these horrific ideas. And I'm thankful to the Susan B. Anthony list, national leaders in the pro-life movement, for demonstrating this in a groundbreaking poll they will share with us today. They've proven what we've known all along in our hearts, that Bay State voters are far more pro-life than the people elected to represent them. So this morning we get to make sure that the legislature hears the voices of those people who elect them, not just Planned Parenthood and the National Abortion Rights Action League. So I'm proud to introduce at this time a representative from the Susan B. Anthony list who made this poll possible, who brings us this good news, Sue Liebel.
Great to be with you here today. I'm sorry we have to be here, but I am so motivated, so inspired by your passion for life. So thank you so much. I want to thank the organizations that have sponsored this as well. This is a very important message that we have to get out. And I'm Sue Swayze Liebel from the Susan B. Anthony list. It's the nation's largest pro-life organization. We're dedicated to electing pro-life leaders and passing pro-life legislation. As you know, across this nation, there's growing momentum informed by science and compassion that, and actually out of an outrage to New York and Virginia. So we want to recognize the humanity of the unborn child in our laws. It's clearer than ever that Roe versus Wade is far from being settled law in the eyes and the hearts of the American people. And this is increasingly reflected in state legislatures all across the country on both sides. That's what you're seeing right now. The American people, we want a fresh debate and a new direction achieved by consensus and built on love for both mothers and babies.
That's right.
Yeah. It's time to redo this. So something is amiss here in Massachusetts. These bills are way too extreme. We recently conducted research, as Andrew said, in the state of Massachusetts, and we're here to share those results with you. Overall, Bay State voters widely do not want more late-term abortions to take place. 62% of Massachusetts voters oppose allowing them. And it's not a partisan issue either. We found that 49% of Democrats and 66% of independent voters oppose more late-term abortions. Now get this, in our polling, 44% of people who say they're pro-choice don't want to extend late-term abortions in the state of Massachusetts. On the part about not requiring abortions to be done in hospitals, 74%, 3 out of 4 voters, Republicans and Democrats, support your existing law requiring that those dangerous procedures be done in hospitals. That includes, get this, 74% of women and 77% of those who self-identify as pro-choice or overwhelmingly want those done in hospitals. They know about health and safety. They understand the dangerous nature of this procedure. And then lastly, I'll share with you that 62% of Bay State voters, including 55% of Dems and 60% of women, support the existing law, which requires parental consent before an underage girl. So we're here because these bills, H 3320 and Senate 1209, don't represent the will of the voters at all. They allow abortion on demand to the moment of birth. They eliminate transparent record keeping. How are you going to ever have statistics or reporting in your state to understand demographics and understand trends if you don't even have that? Also, of course, the repeal of the hospitals and the parental consent. So these are radical. They go both against the will of Massachusetts voters and the wave of pro-life legislation that's crossing this nation in direct response to this type of extremism. These bills are really out of touch.
Yes.
And SBA List is working. We're working with our allies here in Massachusetts to bring you this message, to do our polling and do whatever we can to stop these bills and to hold the abortion extremists accountable in the coming election.
Yes.
Because that's what Susan B. Anthony List does.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming out. Thanks for making your voice heard. It really does make a difference. You're making a difference today, and we thank you for being here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sue. Great news. We appreciate the hard work that you do, the Susan B. Anthony List. I mentioned a few moments ago in my introduction some of the organizations here in Massachusetts that have done great work historically and continue to do so, and that historic work would be wiped out by this legislation. But I want to introduce to you now part of the future of the pro-life movement, the Director of New England for Students for Life, Abby Young.
Good morning, everyone. As Andrew said, my name is Abigail Young, and I'm the New England Regional Coordinator for Students for Life of America.
Yeah.
And as this coordinator, I represent over 1,200 pro-life student groups across the country, and more than 50 of those are right here in New England, including Massachusetts. As a national organization, we work tirelessly to educate this generation, the one standing behind me, about the truth of abortion, to promote life-affirming alternatives and advocate for safer healthcare practices. And these 3 objectives, the Roe Act directly disregards. Senate Bill 1209, titled An Act to Remove Obstacles and Expand Abortion Access, proposes to eliminate, among other things, the requirement that abortions are performed in a hospital or by a doctor, the requirement that medical care be provided to babies born alive, and the requirement that minors have consent and or knowledge of a legal guardian to obtain an abortion. All of these so-called obstacles are proper common sense practices. Why should abortion, an act that takes the life of an innocent human being and endangers the life of another, be held to lower standards than other medical procedures? Instead of reducing restrictions and preventative safety measures for abortion, we should be addressing the real needs of the women seeking these procedures and ensuring that they receive the best care possible because they deserve that. By expanding abortion access like this bill intends to do, we are indeed doing harm. And pro-choice advocates have historically demanded abortion be safe, legal, and rare. But with the latest onslaught of extremist abortion legislation in this country, there has been an even more apparent than ever major shift in the pro-abortion narrative to protecting safe, legal abortion. My question is, what happened to rare? And if this bill passes, what happens to safe? Martin Luther King Jr. said that it's our moral responsibility to stand against unjust laws, and this bill is one such law. According to these recent poll results just shared with you all today, the people of Massachusetts agree that this is bad law. So if you're a student or a young adult, much like the people behind me, and you're listening right now, I want you to know that your voice matters. Encourage your legislators to consider the stances of their constituents. Advocate for the rights of the preborn, and let women know that they're strong enough and supported enough to choose life for their babies. So just like the people standing behind me and the others I represent in this country, there are thousands of young people today standing up for life on their campuses and in their communities. We're the pro-life generation, we're unafraid, and you should be too.
Thank you, everybody. So at this time, I'd like to introduce you to a friend from the Massachusetts Citizens for Life organization, which I'm sure you all know and appreciate the fantastic work they've been doing long before I was in this fight, maybe before I was born. So Myrna Flynn from Massachusetts Citizens for Life, we'd love to hear from you now.
Thank you, Andrew. As Andrew said, my name is Myrna Maloney Flynn. I'm very pleased to be here today. I'm Vice President of Massachusetts Citizens for Life and a resident of the Hampshire County city of Northampton. This poll did not survey members of the pro-life groups standing here today. It surveyed Massachusetts voters, citizens who are registered Democrats, Republicans, Independents, voters of all party affiliations. The results, as you've heard, indicate that common ground exists beneath this contentious and divisive issue. That's the real news here. Where polarization is on display in other states this year, this poll suggests we are different. On the issue of abortion, Massachusetts is poised to set a new and desperately needed course for this country.
Yes, yes.
So today I speak to Today I'd like to speak directly to those who are likely not in the room with us, the legislators of the Commonwealth. Your constituents have spoken. I urge you to listen. Senate Bill 1209, House Bill 3320, the so-called Roe Act, is not what they want. They don't want their teenage daughters irresponsibly targeted and made easier prey for abusers. Voters don't consider hospitals obstacles, as this bill suggests.
Wow.
To remove life-saving resuscitative equipment that would aid viable infants who survive abortion attempts, those who are the youngest citizens in your care, legislators, is to go against the wishes of your neighbors.
That's right, yes.
And legislators, if you support this bill, you are asking your neighbors at home to help pay for each of these inhumane provisions. How will you defend yourself when you run into them at the grocery store or when you drop your children off at school? More importantly, what words could you possibly find to use with your own children or grandchildren when they someday ask you about the law you would have helped to pass? Another quote from Dr. Martin Luther King this morning: "There comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must take it because his conscience tells him it is right." So, legislators, don't vote for something your conscience will not withstand. Don't vote for S1209, H3320. Instead, let's shelve it. Let's embrace our common ground, use it as a foundation, and build a safe, caring, dignified model for the rest of the nation to follow. Each of you, each legislator, and each person here in this room has a unique opportunity to redefine this debate, redirect the conversation, renounce extremism, and represent Massachusetts on a national level while you do so. By your bravery, your leadership, your demonstrated commitment to and genuine care for the people who put you in office, you will, as Dr. King championed, do what is right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now it's my pleasure to introduce one of the directors of another fantastic pro-life organization here in Massachusetts, Debbie Dugan from the Renew Massachusetts Coalition.
Good morning, and I am not the director of Renew Mass Coalition, but a lot of you knew that, didn't you? It is just wonderful to have so many people here today, to be with so many like-minded people who believe that God knit together babies in their mother's wombs. And we are not afraid to stand here and talk about it today. Renew Mass Coalition, for those of you who aren't familiar with the organization, we are a conservative, pro-life organization, and our greatest goal, our biggest goal this year, is to stand up and defeat the Roe Act. So much has already been said about this piece of legislation, and since there are going to be another speaker or two behind after me, I'm not going to go through all the gory details of this bill. But I am going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the world today as we celebrate, the free people in the world are celebrating the 75th anniversary of D-Day. The D-Day landings were Allied forces risked and gave their lives to liberate Europe from Nazi Germany. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not asking you to put on boots, but I thank God you're putting on these red shirts today. And I know that because you have come here today, that you will be involved in this fight, because it is going to take a fight. You know, if you read the local newspapers or if you watch the news, you know that this story is not being told. The truth of this issue is not being shared with the voters. So it's going to be up to us to speak out, to stand out, and to be involved, because this is the Lord's battle.
Right.
know, here in this magnificent building, I know some of you may not have ever even been here before, but this is just a beautiful, beautiful place. So it's so hard to see some of the things, the bad things, legislation that comes out of this place. But we need to pray for those who are in authority over us. That's what we are called to do. We need to lift them up in prayer daily and ask God to do a work in their lives. What we do at Renew Mass Coalition, if you are not on our email list, please get on our email list. If you have not signed the petition, the petitions will be taken to the Health Committee and the Judicial Committee when this bill comes up for discussion, for hearing. And we want to present the petitions, signed petitions, from people like you, your friends, your church members, your soccer moms, you know, your co-workers. We want everyone that you know who shares this belief that infanticide is wrong to sign our petitions so they can be presented to the governor and to these committees. So if you are not familiar with this, if you've not done it so far, you can find it at www.saynotoroe.com. So it's SAYNOTOROE.com. And I would just like to close and have you join me in saying the Our Father.
Amen.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Deborah. And I'm glad you mentioned D-Day. There's a giant mural right outside the door of General Patton, and he's known actually for commissioning the chaplain to pray for his troops prior to one of their major offensives for clear weather, and those prayers were answered, and thousands of American service members' lives were saved. Now, there's another reason why it's important to remember D-Day and World War II and the defeat of the Nazis that's tied directly to this issue. As Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas very clearly articulated in a recent decision, there's a direct link between abortion on demand, as we see it here in our current time and country, and the eugenics movement. So we have not forgotten that history. We pray that we will not repeat it here in Massachusetts. Now I know it's getting warm, and our next two speakers are going to fire up this room even more. It is my privilege, and I'm excited to introduce both Jim and Bernadette Lyons, two of the most fantastic pro-life warriors in the Commonwealth.
Hi, everyone. I have a simple question to ask everyone in this room, including you media people who may be here. Does anyone really think that we should deny medical care to the most vulnerable member of our society? No. A baby that happens to be born in an abortion clinic, born alive, separate from its mother. Well, that is exactly what over 110 members of this legislature wants to do, including, sadly, my own state rep and my state senator. We all know words matter, particularly in legal frameworks. Under current law, Mass General Laws 112, Section 12P reads, if an abortion is performed under 12M, that's 24 weeks or later, the physician must take reasonable steps before and after, including life support equipment to preserve the life of the baby. Under the proposed law, 12P is stricken. These words were removed purposefully. Do not let your legislator tell you that this bill is not about infanticide, because it is. Our founding fathers and mothers, many of whose statues we see around the State House, would be appalled to know what is going on under this bill. We are not going to let this proud cradle of liberty become the shameful cradle of death.
Let's hear it from my wife, Bernadette. So folks, what a great turnout. It's so great to see all you folks here today. I served in this chamber, in this building for 8 years as a state representative. And I just want to take a moment to explain to you the process of how people become sponsors of a piece of legislation. Because I want you to assume one thing today when you go around, if you're going around, or if you're talking to your legislators, that they don't understand what Bernadette just told them, which that this bill actually is infanticide. It's plain and simple. The definition of infanticide, and I want to make sure I quote it correctly, is the killing of a child within a year of birth. That's the definition of infanticide. That's why we call this the Infanticide Act. So when bills are drafted in early January, what happens is the legislators send the bills around to the other legislators and say, hey, would you sponsor this bill? Oftentimes, the legislators who sign on to the bills have never even read the bill. Not only that, if you look at the new bill, you wouldn't know exactly what they were doing. Because these people are clever, and they don't want the truth to be told. And the truth is exactly what is going on here in Massachusetts. The legislature has put in place a piece of legislation that makes it legal for infanticide to exist in Massachusetts. Now, in the last 6 weeks, since we've aggressively together tried to educate our legislators, they have been pushing back and giving us all kinds of reasons, calling us all kinds of names. That's what they do all the time. Because when you expose the truth, they really can't deal with the specific issue. So the question is real simple, and I would urge the media to ask all of the legislators the very simple question that Bernadette just asked. Is there anyone who really believes we should deny medical care to a newly born baby only because it was born in an abortion clinic? No. Is there anyone in this room that thinks that? No. There's no one in this room, and I'm telling you right now, there's no legislator that can defend that. They will tell you that this is medical. They call it health care now. What about the health care of the child? What about the health care of the child? Health care for all except a newborn baby? It's an outrage, and it's an outrage. And they have tried to hide the truth. And it is our job to go and speak the truth. And we don't have to do that in a way that makes everybody all upset. We just have to go in and ask the simple question. The question that Bernadette just posed. Do you really believe in your heart that we should deny medical care to a newborn baby? Would we deny medical care to a newborn baby in a hospital? No. Would we deny medical care to a newborn baby that was born on the highway and an EMT came up to see the baby? Would they say, we're not going to take care of that child? No. But yet, this piece of legislation does that. It also does another thing. It extends the period in Massachusetts for when an abortion can take place. Now, the people on the left also have an argument to that, and it's not true. Their argument is the only reason they want it is because if a mother has been detected with what they refer as a fatal fetal abnormality. Well, the fact of the matter is, according to Gallagher Institute, which is a pro-abortion advocacy group for Planned Parenthood, their own words say that later-term abortions have nothing to do with fatal fetal abnormalities. Yet that is the argument that they want you to believe. All we have to do is speak the truth. That's untrue, and it is true that they are creating legislation that legalizes infanticide. And they don't like to hear that, but it's the truth. The other thing I want you to know, I served on the Public Health Subcommittee in the legislature for 6 years. And one of the things that the legislature passed was they made it illegal for anyone under 18 to go to a tanning salon. Under 18 to go into a tanning salon. The same people on the Public Health Committee is trying to pass in this bill legislation that would relinquish parental involvement in a young woman having an abortion.
Crazy.
It's madness. I would look at them at subcommittee meetings and I would say, so let me see if I understand this. It's not okay for a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 14-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 17-year-old to go into a tanning salon in Massachusetts. But you people think it's okay for a 12 to a 17-year-old young girl to have an abortion without parental involvement? That is madness. I want to share one more story and then I'll turn it over because I know it's getting hot in here. So at one of those subcommittee hearings, there was a senator there who was supporting dropping the legislation and eliminating the age of consent. And I asked him the question, I said, Senator, do you know what the definition of abortion is? For the Massachusetts General Law, section 122, chapter 12. And he said, of course I do. I said, well, why don't you share it with the committee? And he said, well, I just don't know it off the top of my head. I said, okay, so I pulled it out. I happened to have it in my pocket. And I said, the definition of abortion per section 122, chapter 12K, is the willful destruction of an unborn child.
But it is.
The willful destruction of an unborn child. The senator got up, he got so angry, he said, I was just showboating and lying and trying to make a scene. I said, no, Senator, that's the law. And you know what that senator told me? He said, well, if that's the law, we're going to change it. And that's exactly what they're doing. And the reason they're doing it is because they can. And it is our job to do our work to educate the public, and more importantly, right now, to educate our representatives and senators. So I congratulate each and every one of you. I urge you to continue this fight. This is a fight we cannot and will not lose. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Again, thank you all for coming out today, for sitting here in this hot room. Like Jim said, I think both the House of Representatives and the Senate are in session today, so your reps and senators are here. I encourage you to head out those doors now, find your state rep and senator's office, walk in with a t-shirt, and tell them what you just learned today and ask them to vote no on this bill. Thanks for coming. Have a great evening and a good weekend.